Hey everybody! Alright, so after I posted my adoption video, I had a couple people message me on Facebook. One of them telling me that I should make a my story video about everything that happened before I was adopted and why I was adopted. And I had a lady message me and say that she knew that I had been sexually abused, and her granddaughter has recently been dealing with that situation and the court dates, and she said it might help her to know um somebody closer to her, because I know her grandma has been through a situation. And my story is definitely not the worst one you guys are going to hear at all. It's not a good story. There was still abuse, not just sexual abuse, but emotional and physical abuse. um I don't talk about it a lot, and people ask why, and there's not a reason. It's not a, typical conversation starter like, "Hey, how are you?" "I'm good. I was, sexually abused when I was little, but how are you?" It doesn't just come up. So, I guess I'll start at the very beginning when I was born. My aunt actually took me home from the hospital. And throughout the early years of my life, I was juggled back and forth between my biological mom and my aunt. Um, my mom was in and out of prison and jail all the time. She was an alcoholic. She was into drugs. Um, she would ask my aunt back for me, every now and then, say, "Okay, I'm ready, to be a mom." And she had my brothers, but for some reason I was just kind of cast out of the family. And, you know, um, my aunt did take me in. And um, so I really don't have much to say about my mom. I mean, that's pretty much it. She always had boyfriends when I was with her. Several boyfriends. She had sex a lot when I was in the room. Sometimes I'd be sleeping, sometimes I wouldn't be. Um, the last time that I spent a length of period with her was when I was in seventh grade, and I had actually stayed with her a couple months that time. Like, it was usually she just kept me for a couple weeks, and then when I would, act up or act like a kid, she would send me to my aunt. So she had this boyfriend and they had sex all the time, and I didn't want to be around that. I was 7, and so I did whatever I could to stop it, and she got fed up with it, and it told my aunt, like, "Hey, you need to come get her." So, um, my mom doesn't have, well, I don't even call her my mom anymore. I call her Serena, and I call her my incubator, because I do not consider her a mother at all. My brothers did, and, that's fine. She raised them, but she did not raise me. And not that my aunt was much better, but my aunt was the one that raised me up until I was pulled into foster care and adopted. So when I was about 5 years old, my aunt had met this guy. I'm assuming it was online like all the others. It could have been, in person. I have no idea. And we ended up moving in with him, and he lived in Oklahoma with his mother. And this is actually the guy that molested me and raped me. Um, this went on for about 3 to 3.5 years. It would be whenever, everyone else was gone, or when he knew no one else would, like, come into that part of the house. It happened when we were camping. I would, have a certain bedtime because I was a child, and he would say he was tired too. And so while everyone else was out by the fire, it would happen, there in the tent just a few feet away. Um, I did tell my aunt a couple times. I think really just 2 times I straight up told her, like, "Hey, he's touching me, and, it hurts." And she would say, "Well, just stay away from him. Don't go near him." Like, oh, okay, that's really fucking, like, I'm not walking up to him like, "Hey, touch me." So, Um, one night in particular, she says like she knew nothing about this the whole time it was going on, but one night in particular, it was very late, and she said she needed to go grocery shopping, but it was not a grocery shopping hour at all. And I knew what was going to happen if she left that late to go grocery shopping, so I begged her not to leave, and she did anyway. And, he came in my room, and, she obviously came home with nothing, so, like, I always questioned her. Like, I rarely talk to her now, and when I do, is to keep in contact with my little cousin, who was considered my brother since she was kind of my mom. And then her and this guy had a, this boy together. And so I always called him my little brother. And, um, in school, it was, especially when he was a baby, it was, oh, well, this is just a cry for attention because she has a new little brother. And the schools would be like, oh, okay. Like, that's normal. It's fine. Like, I don't think, like, randomly crying out about being molested is normal for, children who have new siblings, but all right. And, um, sorry, that part's kind of hard to talk about for me. Um, so one day when I was in school, I was called to the front office and told that I was leaving, had no idea what was going on, and um, somebody had gotten a hold of my aunt and said that this guy used to touch her inappropriately when they were younger. And like I was showing classic symptoms of like being molested and, raped. And so my aunt was like, oh, I had no idea. And I think like at this point, she knew people were starting to realize like what was going on. And um, we left and went to a safe house. I have no idea how long we were there. I wasn't in school. Like we weren't, like I have no idea how long we were there at all. And from the safe house, we went and lived with a friend of hers in Kansas. And then from Kansas, we went and stayed with another friend who lived with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend had a brother that lived with them. So, like, we were living with her friend, but my aunt was also talking to the brother. So it was like we were also moving in with a new boyfriend. So we moved to Wheatland, Missouri, and I started fourth grade there. It was like the middle of the year. I want to say September, maybe. It wasn't too late in the year, but it wasn't too early. And I made a friend while I was there, and her name was Hannah. And her mom and Tammy actually eventually did help me get out of that situation by, contacting DFS and getting me out of there. But what led up to that was my aunt's new boyfriend that we were living with. One day I was acting up, being a kid, and he said, what do I need to do to make you listen to me? Do I need to molest you like Brian, who was, the guy? And, as a kid, that scared the living shit out of me. Like, I was terrified because I didn't want to have to go through that again. I thought I was finally, away from it after 3.5 years that I was done. And it turned out, as an adult, you don't ever threaten a child like that, but I understand what he was doing now as an adult. But, then I didn't. So I went to school the next day and I told Hannah, like, hey, Asa said he might start molesting me. What do I do? This is my aunt's new boyfriend. The last one molested me, and this one says he might start doing it. Like, what do I do? I'm afraid. Can you please ask your mom if I can come stay the weekend? And things kind of happened from there. They filed a report with DFS, and Asa obviously like kicked us out of the house because he didn't want us there. And we actually went back to Brian, the guy who molested me, because my aunt had nowhere else to go. So she took us back there, and he didn't touch me during that time, thank God. And then like I want to say we were only there for 2 weeks. And then she took his computer and we left and went back to Asa down in Wheatland. And the school got in contact, DFS question, like, hey, where did you guys go? Where'd she take you? And I was like, well, she took me, back to Bryan. And so at school, right before Thanksgiving, it was like the last day before Thanksgiving break, DFS was shutting down for the holiday. And when they got to the school, it was like 2:30 already. And they needed a place for me to go. And around like 3, when all the buses were getting ready to go, Joyce and Leroy worked at the school. Leroy was a bus driver. Mom, or Joyce, worked in the office. And she said, well, we'll take her for the weekend. So she went up in the bus and told Dad, like, hey, there's a little girl. She needs somewhere to go. And I said she could stay with us. So I stayed with them for that holiday. Hannah and her mom sent me with a bunch of clothes and a bunch of toys and stuff because I had nothing because, they just took me from school. And I'm not, since I was a kid, there was a lot that happened that I didn't really know about. So Joyce and Leroy ended up keeping me for a while. And at the end of 4th grade, and they waited until I finished summer school to do anything. But my biological mom wanted to get custody of me. So she sent me letters and they moved me to a Native American home to be closer to her. And um, I didn't want to go. I knew she was going to, flake out and disappear like always. And then come around Christmas time, she flaked out. No, they didn't know where she was. They couldn't get a hold of her. So they're just kind of like, well, what do we do now? And I was like, well, I want to go back to Joyce and Leroy. Like, I was happy there. And before my biological mom came in the picture, like, we started vaguely, talking about adoption. Like, maybe it would be an option in the future. And then, like, she came in the picture and screwed that all up. And so I did end up going back to Joyce and Leroy, and we started the adoption process and severed my mom's rights. And I had a really good judge, and he was awesome. Um, it was hard when I first came to Joyce and Leroy after that weekend that I just kept staying because I was afraid to stay in my room. I would always like make a pallet on Joyce's side of the bed every night I'd go in there. And every time a guy came to the door, I ran and I went and hid in my room until they left. And, a lot of the men that came, they were, just friends of Joyce and Leroy coming to visit, but, it freaked me out. It was like a little bit of PTSD. Um, that was a big thing that we talked about in therapy a lot, was why I did that. And I'm like, I don't know this strange person. Like, why are you questioning so much about this? Like, men scare me. They don't now, but they really used to when I was little. And Joyce and Leroy adopted me when I was in the summer after 6th grade. And then Dad got into an accident my 8th grade year, and he had traumatic brain injuries, and he survived for a little over a year after that, and he actually passed away when I was in 9th grade. So it's just Mom and I now. But, we have a lot of support and from our family, and even though some of the adopted family didn't accept me when they wanted to adopt me because they were an older couple when I came to them. They were in their mid-60s, and they had 3 biological sons that they, had themselves. And the youngest son of theirs is like 22 years older than me, maybe a little more than that. He is in his 40s, and so there's a pretty big age gap. And I know the boys especially didn't like accept me right away. But, it is my family now. They all are my family. And, I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for how far I've come and the people that have helped me get this far. I've completed 3 years of college. I'm at a 4-year university right now. And, you know, with sexual abuse, it is kind of hard to talk about. It's hard, especially to say like exactly what happened and exactly what, people did to you. And it's hard to talk about, being a child that, they don't want to hear you. Like I was always, kept in my room and told to go to my room, and um, nobody ever talked to me. And we moved around so much when I was little. I never got a chance to really make friends at school, and that was hard too. So, um, a lot happened. I got slapped a lot. Um, some of it, it wasn't as bad. And, even the molestation and the raping, that's not as bad as most kids have it. And that's kind of how I try to look at it, is that, it could have been worse for me. Um, that all didn't have to happen to me, but it could have been worse, and other people do have it worse. And, I've risen above it. So, I try to like put a positive spin on it. And, it's hard to get acclimated. Like once you get put into foster care and if you're up for adoption, it's hard, to acclimate to all of these new people and all of these new things, and things you previously weren't allowed to do that you were now, or things that, you know, you could do, but now you couldn't. You couldn't do, now you could. It's weird. And, kids that jump around the foster system, I'm sure I was lucky that I only had 2 foster homes. And I couldn't imagine, jumping around like most children of the system have to do. So, well, that's my story. I left out a lot of the bad, gory, disturbing parts because it is still difficult to talk about. But, it is what it is. And like I said, I've risen above it, and I'm a lot better off than I was. So, yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it answered some questions that those of you who wanted me to post a video had. And, if you ever have more questions, feel free to message me. Feel free to share the video if you think there's anybody that will, benefit from it. I don't mind it being shared at all. So, all right, I'm gonna work on what I hope is funny video next to try to lighten the mood a little bit. So, I'll see you guys later.